Hi everyone. Thank you for joining for this seminar. So today we are going to present with Sarah Perrin an overview of learning in Minfield games and Minfield control problems. So Sarah Perrin is a PhD student at INRIA Lille with Olivier Pietquin and Romuald Elie, respectively at Google Brain and DeepMind. And I am currently a visitor at Google Brain in the team of Olivier Pietquin. So just a small disclaimer, this talk is based on some joint works with several collaborators, but also or mostly on the literature. And so it's not only our work, really the purpose is to give some partial overview of the literature. So let's start with an introduction. Just a few words about the seminar series. We decided to start this series of seminar to encourage interactions between communities, particularly machine learning and Minfield games, because in the past few years there are many very interesting works at the interface of these two fields. And for this talk, more specifically, we are going to focus on learning methods for Minfield games. The literature is growing very quickly, in particular about reinforcement learning. And so what we would like to do is to try to extract a few key points and to try to organize information to make it as accessible as possible, hopefully to make communication easier, and if people want to jump in and contribute, to make that easier as well. So we are preparing a written survey, which will be ready very soon. But in the meantime, today we are going to present the following points. So first of all, the problem setting, for example, stationary, dynamic, etc. Then some iterative methods at the level of the population to compute, for example, Nash equilibria, and after that, how to combine these methods with reinforcement learning. And finally, we will discuss implementation. So please feel free to interrupt if you have questions, comments, or if you want to reach out later and have discussions. We'd be very happy to have feedbacks. This is just an attempt to organize a little bit some of the information in the literature. So first of all, about learning, which is a key point in this talk. So in the past few years, there are many breakthrough results in games in particular. So probably you've heard about Go. That's not the only one, but many recent successes of learning, in particular reinforcement learning. But there are two interpretations of learning, and we would like to disambiguate a little bit this term. So there is one interpretation, mostly in game theory, economics, for example, which is about some iterative procedures where agents adjust and learn some kind of equilibrium. And there is learning as in machine learning, reinforcement learning, where the focus is more on using data, using samples, in order to extract some or build some experience and be better at performing some tasks. And so we are interested in both aspects and the combination of these two aspects. About games, why do we care about Minfield games? Well, situations with many agents, many rational agents appear in nature, in human societies, or in robotics, for example. And the idea is that, solving games with a large number of players is hard. There are some complexity results in this direction. And it gets harder when the number of players increases because it's very hard to keep track of all individual interactions. So one simplification, even though it might be surprising at first sight, is that when n becomes infinite, things become somehow simpler. And there's the assumption that we have some kind of homogeneity and symmetry in the population. So to try to provide a little bit of intuition, let's imagine that you are in a crowd, for example, on a beach, and you want to put your towel somewhere. Probably what you would do is you don't look at each person one by one, but you look at some kind of distribution. So maybe you make a kind of abstraction with a continuous distribution, and you try to see which region is more dense, which region is less dense, and you put your towel where it's more suitable for you. So making this abstraction of a continuous distribution somehow simplifies the problem. So this is mean field approximation coming from statistical physics, but here the agents are rational. So in fact, we have a kind of loop, and in a mean field game, we try to find a Nash equilibrium, which is a pair consisting of a policy or a control and the population distribution. And the loop is the following. You are one agent, you observe the population, and you try to take your best reaction, your best response. But on the other hand, the population is made of agents who are also rational in the same way as you. And so the distribution should be the distribution induced by the policies that you are using, which is denoted by mu superscript pi hat. So mu will be the population distribution through the talk, and pi will denote a policy or control, in general, a randomized control for us in this talk. So we are going to make that more precise in the sequel. I hope it makes sense roughly at an intuitive level. Now, how can we measure somehow closeness to the equilibrium? And we will be interested in that because we will be interested in numerical methods. So one idea could be to say, well, we are going to measure the distance between a policy candidate, pi, and the equilibrium policy, pi hat, if we know it, for example. But that's not necessarily a good idea because it doesn't tell us too much about whether we are in Nash equilibrium or not. We could be very close, but still be very far from being an approximate equilibrium. So one notion that is often used in games is so-called exploitability, which evaluates the quality of a policy. In a mean field game, it takes the following form. So let's imagine you have a policy pi in mind. And let's imagine everyone uses pi. Then this induces some population distribution, mu pi. And now you have a choice if you are a single individual player. Either you can use pi as well, or you can try to deviate and maximize your reward and try to be better off. And if you can be much better off, it means that pi is not at all a Nash equilibrium somehow. On the other hand, if the exploitability is 0, it means you cannot be better off, and so you have a Nash equilibrium. So we are going to use this notion later on to assess somehow the convergence of some algorithms. Now, what is the connection with reinforcement learning? At least two motivations. One is to have model-free methods. So methods, as we're going to explain later, for which we don't need to know the model. The agents can learn an optimal behavior or an equilibrium behavior by trial and error. This is one motivation. Another important motivation, which also is present in some of the successes I've mentioned earlier. In some cases, you could potentially write a model, but it would be so complex that you don't actually want to solve exactly this model because it's too complicated. And it turns out that reinforcement learning methods can be very efficient to learn an optimal policy without, for example, using exact dynamic programming or without solving exactly PDEs, but just by trial and error. So the idea could be the following. You have a many player game in mind. There are too many players, so you approximate it using a mean field game. And then maybe the environment, the model is so complicated that you don't actually want to use a method based on the model, and you rely on reinforcement learning with mean field interactions to solve it. Another line of thought could be to say, well, I start from a many player game. I look at the many agent reinforcement learning model. So it would be multi-agent reinforcement learning, but with a large number of agents. And you consider mean field RL as an approximation of that. For this talk, we are mostly going to focus on this line of motivation somehow. So this was an introduction at a very high level. Now, as I've mentioned before, we are first going to discuss the problem setup, then iterative methods, combination with reinforcement learning, and some numerical illustrations. So in terms of setup, we have, for this talk, 3 settings in mind. There could be more, but one is a static setting, which more or less corresponds to the problem of the towel on the beach. And this is a problem in which you don't have any states. The only thing you can do is to choose an action, and that's it. And everyone chooses an action at the same time, and your reward depends on the action chosen by other people or the distribution of action. Then there is a stationary setting in which you have a state, potentially your state is stochastic, it changes, but the state of the population is stationary. And you try to find your optimal policy against this stationary distribution. And then a last setting, maybe more complex, is the so-called evolutive here, which could be finite or infinite horizon, in which the population distribution actually changes through time. And so these settings have appeared in the literature. And the reason why we try to clarify these settings is that it's not always the same methods that can be applied to different settings. Whether we are talking about iterative methods or whether we're talking about reinforcement learning, not all methods are suitable for all settings. And so we believe it's quite relevant to distinguish a little bit these settings. All right, so the static game is probably the simplest. Let's imagine you have the beach and possible positions for your tower. This would be your action set. We are going to assume it is finite in this talk. The player behavior, we are going to assume it is a stochastic action. So you can pick one action randomly. Population behavior is also a distribution of actions. So it would be Xi here. The reward of a player using a policy pi depends on the population distribution of actions, Xi. And this is an expected reward when you pick A according to policy pi. And this reward could encode crowd aversion, or for example, you want to be close to the ice cream stall, etc. The notion of solution that we consider in the mean field game is a Nash equilibrium, which consists, as we have explained informally before, in a pair, a pi hat and Xi hat, where pi hat is the best response, PR, against Xi hat, meaning that you maximize your reward. And the consistency conditions here is very simple. It just says that Xi hat should be pi hat because everyone is rational in the same way. That's an assumption we make. So an important remark is that here pi hat does not need to depend on Xi hat. In an n-player game, typically your choice would depend on the observation of the rest of the population because you would have an empirical, for example, mean of action, and this would be stochastic if you have a finite number of players. But because we're in a mean field regime, by some kind of law of large numbers, the population distribution should be completely deterministic in this setting. And so you don't really need to give that as an input of your policy. Your policy can be just completely independent of Xi hat, provided you are perfectly rational. Now, we are mostly going to focus on the dynamic setting in the rest of the talk, which is perhaps more interesting and challenging. So now you have a state, element of a state space, S. We assume S and A finite for simplicity. The interactions will be through this mean field state denoted by mu, which is just a distribution over the state space. We could be more general than that, but here we're going to stick to this kind of interaction. Discrete time, transition probability, and reward for one individual player. And these are functions of the player state, the player's action, and the population distribution, the mean field term. We have a discount factor if we are in infinite horizon. And a policy is just a function from S to distributions over actions. The evolution of a population distribution, state distribution, is given by a transition matrix P, which potentially involves mu. So this is some kind of nonlinear evolution, potentially. All right, so now let's define what we mean by a stationary game, stationary mean field game, and evolutive mean field game. So in the stationary case, somehow we don't have an initial distribution, but we try to find a stationary distribution mu, and we plug mu in the reward and in the transition probability. So this gives us the evolution of the state of one player, potentially stochastic, and this gives us the reward for this player, and we sum over time and we take the expectation. And at each time step, we pick a random action following the policy pi, which is a function of the state of this individual player. A Nash equilibrium is going to be a pair of pi hat and mu hat, such that pi hat is the best response when the population is in the stationary state mu hat. So we maximize the reward. And mu hat is stationary when everyone uses pi hat, which can be formulated using the transition matrix or using some kind of fixed point operator, this calligraphic P here. So this is really a fixed point problem. Potentially, we could have multiple best responses, not necessarily uniqueness, particularly when we use finite state or action spaces. And another remark is in some papers, instead of considering mu hat defined in this way, we consider a gamma discounted version of mu starting from a fixed M0. And then this gamma discounted distribution is a kind of proxy for the stationary distribution. In the evolutive case, it's very similar. You can see that we use the same reward function, the same transition function, but we plug the distribution at the current time step n. So mu is assumed to start from some prescribed M0. It evolves because the population uses some kind of policy. And at each time step, we plug the mu n in the reward and in the transition function. So the notion of Nash equilibrium is pretty similar, except that now both pi hat and mu hat are vectors or sequences, potentially infinite if we want to be infinite horizon. But these are really time dependent. So mu hat, for example, starts from M0, and then we apply the transition matrix at each time step in order to get the flow or the sequence of population distributions. So here again, this can be formulated as a fixed point problem with different operators, M, F, and NBR. Now, how do we solve these problems traditionally, let's say, when we have time? So let's forget the static case for now. Let's focus on time-dependent problems. In the stationary case, we can introduce value function, which is independent of time. It's a function of the state of one agent, but it depends on the mean field term and the policy used by this agent. And it is basically the expectation of what we call the Q function, which is also called the state action value function because it's a function of X and A. It says, well, if I'm state S and I use action A, then I get this first reward. And then I follow the policy pi. So I get this value function, which depends on pi. And all of that is somehow parameterized by mu, the mean field term. So this V function and this Q function both satisfy a fixed point or two fixed point equations with some Bellman operators, T and B, which are not written explicitly here. Maybe you can figure out these operators. And we can do the same thing for the optimal value functions by denoting by V mu star, the case where we take the best possible policy. And here again, we can define an optimal Q function and we have fixed point equations. Now, this Q function is very nice because if you give me this Q function, even if I don't know the model, I don't know P, I don't know R, I don't mean anything else, I just take the argmax and this gives me the optimal policy or an optimal policy. Now, if I know only the V function, it's not so clear how to recover the optimal control from here. In the finite horizon case, we can also introduce a value function, but now it also depends on time. So this subscript here, and it starts from the terminal time with the terminal condition, and then we go backward in time. So you see that V at time n depends on V at time n+1. So there is a clear direction in time. And then it's not really a fixed point problem anymore. We can define the Q function, we can define the optimal value functions, and we can again recover an optimal policy, which is time dependent. So we take the argmax at every time step. Now, so far we have discussed Nash equilibria, but there is another class of problems, which is also very interesting, which is social optima. And in this case, it corresponds to a cooperative game in which the whole population uses a policy pi. So we still use the same reward function, the same transition function, but now instead of freezing mu when we perform the optimization, we actually only give a policy pi and everyone uses policy pi. So the whole population distribution is influenced by pi or driven by the policy pi. And so this is really a maximization problem, which corresponds to the problem of a central planner or a cooperative population trying to maximize the social optimum. Social reward. So we can do the same thing in the stationary setting, which is not written here for the sake of time. So this problem actually is really a problem at the population level. You can introduce a reward function R bar at the level of the population, so completely integrating somehow the state of one agent. Same thing for the transition P bar at the level of the population. And so the key difference with the mean-field game is that we can consider that as a Markov decision process, an MDP, but in a mean-field game, we have an MDP for one single player against the population. The population is given to you, and you solve a control problem for one single player. But in mean-field control or social optimum, you actually write an MDP at the level of the whole population. So if you write dynamic programming and you try to introduce a value function, as we did before for the mean-field game, here it would really be probably a value function for the population. So the state would be mu. You could also consider a value function for x and mu, but let's focus on the value function at the level of the population. And so intuitively, if you do dynamic programming, then you are going to get optimal policies, which are also functions of mu, or mu n at time n. So this raises the question, the same question in the mean-field game. And we could say, well, why didn't we consider policies that are functions of the population state? So if we take the stationary case, we can consider policies, which instead of being just functions of S, are functions of S and delta S, so the population state. And the reason is that, well, if you just have policies of this class and you learn an equilibrium policy pi hat, then it's good as long as the population is at equilibrium. But if the population deviates from the equilibrium, then somehow you are blind. You just keep applying the same policy, which is a function of your own state, and that's it, which is not very consistent with what we think in terms of learning or being able to generalize. Same thing for the infinite horizon evolutive case. In fact, including the population distribution in the state allows you to recover some stationary problem, stationary Markov decision process, which is very convenient for reinforcement learning. We will come back to this point at the end of the talk. And this is connected to the master equations and to what we decided to call the master policies, which are policies that allow you to find a Nash equilibrium for any mean field flow somehow. So being able to react to various population behavior. But first of all, we are going to come back to standard policies, and we will discuss that again at the end of the talk. So Sarah is going to take the floor from now on, unless you have questions or comments. But maybe we can take questions at the end if you don't have questions now. Okay, well, maybe Sarah, if you want to share.
Okay, I will share my screen. Does anyone see my screen?
Yes, I think we can see it.
Okay, yes. Great. Thank you. So thank you very much, Mathieu. I think it was very clear, at least for me. Please feel free to interrupt if you have any question or remark. I'm happy to answer during the talk, so don't wait until the end. I'm going to present now iterative methods, which are the optimization algorithm that we use to learn Nash equilibrium for mean field games in the different settings. And then I will present how reinforcement learning can help and insert in these iterative methods and can be a subroutine of these methods. So at the most basic level, we can see iterative methods as the alternation of two updates. The first one is an update of the policy, and the second one an update of the population distribution, which is the mean field state mu. The update of the policy can be of different nature. It can either be like a full best response, which amounts to solving an entire MDP with a fixed population distribution, or it can be just a small step towards a better policy, for example, with a policy iteration. It can be model-free or model-based. I will come back to these different settings after. And for the population distribution, we can either compute it with the full knowledge of the model, that is to say, to use the dynamics. So we will use, for example, this equation, which amounts to solving the fixed point to get this mu k plus 1, or use Kolmogorov's equation, Fokker-Planck equation, etc. Or if we are in a model-free setting, so maybe we don't know the transition dynamics, we can use either Monte Carlo samples. So let's say we sample many agents and then just compute the mean field flow, which is associated with these agents. Or we can use function approximation with kernels or normalizing flows or any way of computing a function. And one thing that is important is we will repeat these two steps until convergence, and convergence means here until the exploitability becomes low enough. So this can be a stopping criterion. It's not the only one. Maybe we don't want to check the exploitability at every step, and we will only look at it after k-step. I mean, there are many different variants. And we won't talk about solving directly the PDE system, because it's possible to do this with neural networks, but this is out of scope for this talk. So for the stationary case, as I was saying, there are mainly two big families of algorithms. The ones that compute a best response. So as Mathieu said before, this amounts to solving the fixed point equation here to find the optimal Q function, and then we can directly deduce the policy by taking the argmax of this function. And the second family is more based on policy iteration. So what we do is just an evaluation of the policy. So here we also need to solve this fixed point, and then we will take the argmax. But here, so it's the Q function of the optimal policy, whereas here it's the Q function of the current policy pi k. And in both cases, we will, of course, compute the stationary mean field flow. So for example, with this equation. So as we are in a stationary case, what we need to do is to find this fixed point. And one variant that we have seen in some works of the literature is that instead of taking the fixed point here, sometimes people just do one step. So you will just do one application of the fixed point and get mu k plus 1 like this. And so here to solve this, one can use value iteration, but also you could use like gradient, policy gradient methods, or any reinforcement learning methods that can find the best response when mu is fixed. So now the evolutive case, basically, so you can see that it's the same families of algorithms, either best response computation or policy evaluation, but we will not do it in the same way. We will more do, if we know the model, we can do backward induction here. So just backpropagate the final value of the Q function, infinite horizon, and then take the argmax. But here, once again, we will compute the optimal Q value, whereas in policy evaluation, we will just evaluate the policy. But if in the stationary case, these are not of the same complexity, like this is, I think this is way cheaper than to compute the best response, whereas in finite horizon, we do backward induction in both cases, so this is of comparable complexity. And for both of these settings, one potential issue is the lack of convergence of these methods. So this is basically because sometimes the composition of the mean field operation, this one that we can get, for example, with the Fokker-Planck equation, with the computation of the best response is not always a contraction. So this can lead to some oscillations and instabilities. So there are many fixes that we can, and tricks that we can add to have the convergence and to stabilize the learning process. All the ideas try to add some smoothing or some regularization, or to add some stochasticity to the process. The first family, we called it damping or smoothing. This would amount to average the past mean fields. So we can either take the exact average, so this would be fictitious play, or just add a constant learning rate to update the distribution. We can also do it for the policy. So there are a lot of variants of this in the literature, most often referring to fictitious play. Then another idea is to, instead of taking the argmax of Q, because this is kind of a harsh operation, so it can lead to a lot of instabilities. So we can add some stochasticity to the policy by taking the softmax instead, which will basically, if the temperature is very low, we will recover the argmax, and if it's very high, like we will recover more like a uniform policy. And finally, the entropy regularization. So I think this has been studied in a lot of papers recently. The idea is to add a term to the reward. So it changes a bit the MDP associated with the Q function. And it ensures also the convergence. So there are a lot of references here. I'm not going to explain everything, but feel free to check in the slides if you want to see the relative papers. Okay, so now this is a small diagram just to sum up what I said before. As I said, the most basic idea is to do fixed point iterations, but sometimes it's not very stable. So what we can do here is to average the distributions as we do in fictitious play. And in the same way, if we do policy iteration, instead of having this, which can sometimes lack convergence, we can sum up the Q function and take the softmax. And basically, if we do this, like we recover the online mirror descent algorithms. And there are many different variants and combinations of, for example, you can just take the softmax and not do this. You can add regularization when you compute the Q function here. So there are many variants, and I think a lot of them have been studied in the literature. So to end this part, I would like to insist that we have mainly two classes of assumptions in the literature. The first one is what we have called quantitative assumptions. So often the papers look at fixed point iterations, and they have some strict contraction properties with some Lipschitz constants or short time. So this can be nice because you can have a simple algorithm, but the assumptions are sometimes a bit hard to check in practice. So there is also like the second set of assumptions, which are called like the qualitative or structural assumptions. And these are more about the structure of the game. So let's say you can study potential midfield games or monotone midfield games, and the proof of convergence will be different. And we'll look at Lyapunov functions and stability to show convergence. And most of our work, we use this. And I would say like one drawback is that it's not easy to get the dependency of the transition probabilities in the distribution. So we don't have the distribution in the transition probabilities, but in the other way, like we have convergence for a larger class of midfield games. So now I'm going to present how we can mix reinforcement learning with the previous methods. This is just to recall quickly the reinforcement learning setup. So the reinforcement learning relies on the Markov decision process setting, which is basically this equation that we have already presented. But sometimes you don't know R and you don't know P, the transition matrix. So we need to interact with an environment. So let's say that you have an environment and an agent. Here we have, for now, we have only one agent. It's just to present the setting. The agents can take an action that will the environment will take into account, and the environment will give back the associated reward and the next state. And so by learning with trial and error, the agent will learn what action to perform depending on the state it is in. So now if we add the min-field game setup, we have a dependency here in the transition probabilities, we have a dependency in the reward, and you can see that the Q function depends of mu, of course, but this is fixed. So as Mathieu said, in the stationary setting, this will be only one population distribution. In the finite horizon, we will have NT distribution, NT being the time horizon. And when we interact at a given learning step, even in the finite horizon setting, like the flow is fixed. So we will always have the same evolution of the distribution. And in the static case, in the stationary case, we'll have mu instead of mu n here because we have only one distribution. And so here we see that it's basically the same if the distribution is frozen, like we can interact as before. And this is a min-field control setup. It's a bit different because in control you don't control only one agent but the whole population. So the MDP is not in the same spaces as before. Before it was in the state and the action, and now it's in the distribution and in A bar. And in fact, A bar is a function mapping the states to the actions. So it's a policy. So A bar can be considered as the policy pi that we had before. And so what we learn is a policy is like a meta policy that learns how to act on the policies pi that we had here. So coming back to min-field games, I don't think I will talk about min-field control anymore in the rest of the talk. This is just to precise some stuff about policy evaluation. So if you have a tabular representation, so let's say the state space is small enough and is finite, you can use reinforcement learning algorithm to learn Q. So you can just use pointwise update for all states X and action A. And now if you have continuous spaces or maybe to a space which has too many states, what you can do is to parameterize the Q function with the parameters theta and to minimize this loss. So basically what you are trying to do is to learn the Q function, which is this is like the bootstrap error in reinforcement learning. And to learn it, you will just sample many rewards and states from the environment and get the approximate expectation with Monte Carlo methods. And in practice, so this there are some stuff to fix. Let's say the learning rates, the updates, which can be synchronous or asynchronous, the replay buffer, the size of the replay buffer, etc., etc. Okay, and about the optimal policy computation. So this is how to compute a best response when you are in reinforcement learning and not when you don't know the model. If you have a table, you can just do a Q-learning algorithm. So this is basically this update. And otherwise, you can use some deep reinforcement learning techniques such as DQN, soft actor critique, in particular if you are in continuous spaces, or proximal policy optimization, etc., etc. So this is nice because we have like some very state-of-the-art reinforcement learning algorithm that we can directly apply to min-field games as in the loop of learning, let's say in the fixed point iterations. Okay, so as I already said, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt. Otherwise, I'm going to present some numerical illustrations. Okay, so this is a big list of papers. Sorry if we forgot something, and please tell us and we will add it, of course. This is for mean field game, and we have the same for mean field control. So there are many different settings and many different combinations of all we have described before. But everything will be, I think, much more organized in the survey. So to study the numerical illustrations, there are two different metrics that I think are important. So the first one is the exploitability. Mathieu has already presented. It assesses how good is a policy. And the second one is the Wasserstein distance. And basically it says is how good is the distribution. So to compute this, we would need the distribution of the Nash equilibrium. So of course, we can do this only if we know what is the optimal distribution. But like to get a benchmark, I think it's often feasible. And just one small remark, maybe you wonder why we don't use the Wasserstein distance over the policies. But I think one problem is that we can have many different best responses for policies, so maybe the distance between best responses is not a good metric. So this is why we prefer to use the exploitability. Okay, so now I'm going to present 3 examples. This is the first one. This is just a small game. So you have a one-dimensional beach. I think it's very close to what Mathieu described at the beginning of the talk with the beach towel problem, where you want to put your towel on the beach. But here you have a bar. So you want to be close to the bar. This is the distance to the bar. But you don't want to be too close to the other agents. So this is like the social avoidance term. And you are lazy, so you don't want to move too much. And the goal is to get close to the bar while staying away from other people. This is a dynamic, so at each time step you can just stay still or go to the left or to the right, and there is an additional noise that will push you with a small probability to the left or to the right. This is the kind of results we get with different methods. Here I think we used fictitious play and either backward induction when we knew the model, or Q-learning when we don't know the model. We start from an initial distribution, which is uniform, and we see, so this is the time, and this is the different states of the game. We see that quickly the agents go next to the bar and form like kind of a V inverse shape, and we have the similar results for the model-free method. We can see that both methods converges, so this is nice. Some quick words about adding common noise. So common noise is a process that can add a common source of randomness. So it's a noise that will affect all the agents in the same way. Because like here, we had some idiosyncratic noise, but of course this is different for every agent. We would sample a different noise. But here it's the same noise for all the agents. The common noise we used is just to have a probability of 0.5 for the bar to close at time step 15. And this is what we get. So for if the bar stays open, we see that the agents anticipate that the bar may close, but as soon as they see that the bar is open, they just go back next to the bar. But if the bar closes, of course, they disperse and they reach, again, a uniform distribution. Okay, so now I'm presenting the second example, which is flocking. So we have a population of birds, which are players. They can be also like fishes or any animal or robots you want. The state will be the position and the velocity in dimension d plus d. So let's say you are in dimension 3, we will be in dimension 6 for the state. The control will be the acceleration. The velocity of each bird will depend on the velocities of its neighbors, as we can see in the reward here. So the representative agent wants to minimize the difference of its velocity with the velocity of its neighbors. And this is also, it depends on the distance of its neighbors, because like closer neighbor will have more influence than the ones which are far away. So this is dynamics, which are really classics. We have a small noise here too. And I think this was a challenging problem because we had both a continuous state and action spaces. The state space may be in dimension 6, which begins to be quite big. So we use deep learning, both for the distribution and the policy, to learn the solution. For the distribution, we use the normalizing flows, and for the policy pi, we use the soft actor critic algorithm, which can deal with continuous state and action spaces. And if we start with a random population with agents, I think they had completely random position and velocities. We see that at convergence, they have learned a path between the buildings. So this can be seen as some buildings and some birds trying to fly between the buildings. And there is a nice video, maybe I will show it after if we have time. And finally, the last example, which is learning master policies. So this is the setting Mathieu presented at the end of his part. What we want to do is to learn a policy that can react to any distribution, because what we find limiting in the literature is that you learn a policy, but you can actually only react to either the initial distribution mu0 in finite horizon, let's say, or in gamma discounted setting, or to the stationary distribution mu if you are in a stationary setting. So this is why we try to learn these master policies that can actually react to any distribution mu. And to do this, we had a basic idea, which is just to add distribution to the Q function architecture. So of course, this is continuous, so we need to use function approximation, and we use the neural networks. So now we are looking at the beach bar problem, but in 2 dimensions. This is why we use like a convolutional neural networks to treat the distribution as an image. So this is the training set we used. The basic idea is just to use fictitious play, but on different initial distributions, and to try to learn a policy that depends on the distribution. So if we take this initial distribution, the goal for the agent is to go at the center of the domain while spreading a little bit. This is the testing set we used, so Gaussian distribution, but with different means. And this is the kind of results we get. So if we take this initial distribution, this is what we get with an exact method, let's say fictitious play in tabular without the dependency on the distribution for the policy. But now if we take, let's say, this distribution and we apply the exact best response that is optimal against this distribution, this is what we would get. So it's like if the agents were blind and just apply the policy without looking at what happens. But of course, as they started from a different place, they don't know how to react, so they just crash into the wall. But now with our method, we can learn something which is closer to the optimal solution. So of course, we can see that there are a lot of approximations here. So the method is quite slow to converge for now, but this is a nice first step that we're trying to improve. Okay, so finally, I would like to speak about OpenSpiel quickly. OpenSpiel is an open source library developed by DeepMind. Recently, we have added min-field games to this library, and we are adding right now, so there are already some methods such as fictitious play, online mirror descent, and now we are trying to add model-free methods, so deep fictitious play, etc., etc. And also to implement different baselines from the literature. So if you want to contribute or if you are interested, you can reach out. And I think you can try to play with it. There is a link to a collab here. So maybe you can just try, and if you have any remark, we would be happy to hear them. And to finish, so yes, we have seen the different setups, different methods, either iterative or how you can use RL in the iterative methods to learn a Nash equilibrium. And we have seen also different numerical examples. What we want to do now is to see how we can generalize. So that means try to extend the master policy to new algorithms, or maybe look for a real-world application of Unity games. So same, if you have any idea of interesting applications, like we will be very happy to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if you have questions, comments, remarks. If you want to ask directly or in the chat.
I just have one very naive question, if possible. This is about the slide 23 that you have. So you had all these pictures about the possibility to enforce convergence in the learning. Yeah. When you said that you have all these methods, putting entropy or using softmax, do you mean that then you have a threshold on the temperature? Let's say, for instance, for the entropy, I had in mind that this is only possible when the temperature is for a given range of values, and you cannot be as close as you want to the original mean field game. Is it correct? And what about the max? Is it the same, I presume?
Yes. So a lot of works that study regularization, they modify a bit the Nash equilibrium. So of course, if you add too much, let's say if tau of the softmax is too big, or if you add too much entropy, it will change Nash equilibrium. So it biases a bit the solution.
Yeah, but in fact, when you say a bit, it might not be small. I mean, you have a hard threshold on the. Yeah, okay. So I agree with you. This was just to check. Okay.
But just a remark: online mirror descent does not bias the solution actually.
Okay. Thanks.
I don't know about I don't know if we can identify a threshold or what kind of threshold you have in mind exactly, but for sure, when you increase the penalization or the entropy regularization, this biases more and more the Nash equilibrium. So it may converge very easily, but to something that is somehow very far from the true Nash equilibrium for the unregularized problem, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there is a threshold, but yes, it helps convergence, but the price to pay is because now if you have a specific threshold in mind, we could look at that more precisely.
No, not exactly a formula, but for me, this was if I make the analog with what happens for Matin-Vazov equation, for instance, when you put an entropy, it means that you have to put a noise, and on the long run, if you want to have the convergence towards an invariant regime, then this is pretty much the same. You need sufficiently a noise that is sufficiently strong to be sure that there is convergence towards an invariant regime. So I had just in mind this very rough analogy, and I wanted to check with you.
Right. Yes. Here for the entropy regularization, it would be a noise on the policy, but yes, probably there is an.
Yeah. This is a noise on the policy. No, but I understand this. Yeah, this is not a noise on the state. Yeah, sure. I understand this. This was just by analogy that I had in mind this threshold.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
I think there is a question from Jean-Pierre.
Yes. So the learning rate, it depends which one. For example, the one in fictitious play is kind of always the same. Is 1/k. Somehow for the usual definition of fictitious play. For OMD, there is this parameter alpha, in principle, it should not bias, this parameter alpha should not bias the Nash equilibrium. So it should always converge to the same Nash equilibrium. Now in practice, how do you choose it? I don't know if there is...
I would say it's like in machine learning, like if you have a bigger alpha, maybe you will converge faster at the beginning, but then you maybe won't be able to reach a level of exploitability which is low enough if it's too big.
Right.
I guess.
So I don't know if we have a general theoretical answer. I would say it's more by trying different values of alpha and checking, for example, your exploitability. And if you reach a lower exploitability, then you are, in some sense, closer to be a Nash equilibrium. And I would say it's the same thing for the other methods in reinforcement learning. I don't know if we have a general answer that actually works in practice. There are some theoretical answers, but I feel that very often in practice, you want to try different values of learning rate, as far as I know. Thank you.